Hello and welcome to another episode of Ain't It Scary with Sean and Carrie. I'm the titular Sean.
And I'm the very titular Carrie.
And this is the show that takes you inside the unbelievable, the ooky, the spooky, and the bizarre, and tries to find an answer. What are we trying to find an answer to this week, Caroline?
Well, this week, we're starting another two-parter.
Oh, so soon?
Yeah.
Are you sure we can handle it?
I can handle it.
Okay.
Can you handle it?
Oh, I'm ready.
Okay. Sean, as you know, I have always been really fascinated by Diana, the Princess of Wales.
Yes. Princess Di.
Mm-hmm. The former Queen-to-be of England.
Yes, I remember her. She was a purple bear, and she had a rose on her chest.
And she was worth a lot of money. The real Princess Di, I really admire her. She basically had to grow into adulthood in the public eye and deal with a publicly cheating husband and still act like a loving mother to William and Harry, who I'm sure people our age know very well. She also gave voice to important charitable causes around the world, including landmine awareness and AIDS. But she was by no means perfect. She was pretty open with her struggles with mental health and eating disorders as she got older. But I think she was someone who genuinely tried to do some good with her fame and notoriety, because she was really a good person at heart.
Okay, convince me.
Well, Sean, with the new season of The Crown on Netflix, a whole new group of people are getting to know Diana's story for the first time.
That's right, and you should check in with our friends over at the Lords of Grantham if you want to look at The Crown. Yes,
the Lords of Grantham podcast. They go over Downton Abbey, and now they're also doing The Crown, so check it out. But aside from them, I would say many people around our age may not know a ton about Diana's story and may not have even been interested in it until now. But our parents lived through the time where she was the biggest news in the world.
Oh, I thought you were going to say our parents are horny for The Crown.
Yes, but aside from that, I think there's just this kind of generational gap when it comes to that story. It's kind of similar to like the Bill Clinton, Monica Lewinsky type of story, where it's sort of adult stuff. We don't really know about it. We know something's going on, but we don't really know.
Yeah, I remember both of them being on the news quite a bit. This story is where I learned the word paparazzi from, for sure.
Yeah. Some of us might even remember her tragic death in 1997.
That's where I learned the word paparazzi from.
Yeah, I was about to go into second grade at the time. I was still pretty young, but I remember it. I remember being very sad because she seemed so nice and just, she was a beautiful princess, and it just seemed unfair and weird that she would die. But, not a lot of people our age remember her impact unless they've read biographies on her. But now that's changing. One of my best friends, for instance, Sarah, one of our close friends as a couple, she blew through all 4 seasons of The Crown in the span of a week. So I was fielding messages from her like, Charles is such a piece of shit, and so on. And I know for sure she had no interest in the monarchy before this. Definitely not their doings before, I don't know, now. In the 80s and 90s, she just could not care. But now she does. Diana has become, for lack of a better word, a character now in the public consciousness for people in the millennial or Gen Z generations. And with that renewed interest, of course, comes renewed conspiracies about her death.
Oh. So this is like a fun story about Diana's death.
It's a combination. That's why there's 2 parts. Diana, Princess of Wales, also known colloquially as Princess Diana or Princess Di, passed away from injuries sustained from a fatal car crash in Paris on the night of August 31st, 1997.
Or did she?
Well, some think the crash was only the beginning of the story. And I want to go into why that there are some similar conspiracy theories surrounding Diana's death as there are with like JFK and Marilyn Monroe.
Okay.
I think it's all kind of in the same hemisphere. It's just not necessarily due to the American government.
JFK's death and Marilyn Monroe's death, or are
Death.
you referring to the conspiracy that JFK had Marilyn Monroe killed?
Well, that's part of it. But no, his death, Marilyn Monroe's death, these kind of Elvis's death, when a huge figure like this dies, conspiracy theories pop up.
Tupac.
Yeah. Now, I want to go through this as respectfully as possible because she's someone I admire even still. And if she did die in an accident, then I don't want to make it too, gross going through this story.
Mm-hmm.
Just like people did while she was alive. And, I want to handle it pretty respectfully. But I am truly curious as to why these conspiracy theories abound about her death.
Yeah.
And why they persist to this day. So, in this episode, we'll be going through the backstory of Princess Diana and her history with the British royal family, and also discuss her death and some of the initial sketchy things about what happened that fateful night.
Okay.
So that's going to be part 1. The next episode, I'll go into the main conspiracy theories of why people think Diana was assassinated and not killed in an accident, and who may have been the one or ones to order the hit.
Very exciting.
And I'll also go into the results of the official inquests into her death, and there were 3.
All right. So after next week's episode drops, we should expect some arrests to follow, right? Once you blow this thing wide open.
Oh yeah, this podcast is going to be the one. For now, though, let's start at the beginning, and I'll recap her story up until that fateful night in Paris. Diana was born Lady Diana Spencer in Sandringham, England on July 1st, 1961, to her mother Frances and her father John Spencer, 8th Earl Spencer. So she was already part of the hierarchy, aristocracy.
Inbred.
Allegedly. That's a Sean theory, it's not mine. As a child, she led a privileged life, but a lonely one. She was the 3rd daughter born to the Earl Spencer, and this was still a time when titles were still passed down father to son only. So she came into the world a disappointment because they were convinced that she was going to be a boy.
No heir.
Yeah. Her younger brother was born, but a few years later, Charles Spencer. So he became the Earl after their father died, but till then, Diana, she was not the favorite, I will say that. Earl Spencer and Frances didn't even name Diana for a week after her birth because they were so determined to have a boy, they hadn't even chosen a girl's name.
They were like, maybe a penis will come if we just hope hard enough.
Yeah, well, it didn't. Her parents divorced in 1967 when Diana was just 6, and this violent breaking up of her family unit really traumatized her for the rest of her life. Speaking of trauma, she met Prince Charles, son of Queen Elizabeth II and heir to the British throne, a few times throughout her life because she was part of a noble family, and both of her grandmothers had served as ladies-in-waiting to Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother.
What is a lady-in-waiting?
Back in the day, it would be like a lady of the bedchamber type of thing, and you were kind of like a glorified maid in a way, or like her little friends that would be around.
Okay.
Nowadays, it's more of like a friend thing, but you're also kind of a personal assistant, as far as I could tell.
Okay.
So these people might, since they're also aristocracy, they might not be getting her like a coffee, but they're helping her with just general stuff, giving her advice, things like that.
Okay, sort of a Farnsworth Bentley.
Yeah, but this is like their official job. Anyway, so they had served in ladies-in-waiting to the Queen Mother, who is Elizabeth II's mom, and they remained close friends because the Queen Mother lived forever. She died in 2002, I think. So she was around, and so were Diana's grandmothers. Diana's oldest sister, Sarah, actually dated Prince Charles seriously for a time. But in 1980, he met the now 19-year-old Diana. So she was 19 in 1980.
How old was Charles?
He was 32.
Oh, Chuck.
Yeah. He met her during a country weekend and took interest in her immediately.
Oh, classy, Chuck.
So following a whirlwind courtship, they married on July 29th, 1981. The wedding was one of the biggest TV events of all time, and it's hard to... You can't even compare it to like a Super Bowl.
So they met while he was dating her sister, and then he immediately dumped her sister for her?
I mean, they definitely ran into each other at that point, but I think Diana was 16.
Oh, okay.
And they'd met when Diana was a kid, because I think her and her brother, Charles, used to play with like Andrew and Edward, Charles's younger brothers. I think they were closer in age.
And so she was 9 then, and Charles was like
20,
32.
Yeah. I mean, it's not that crazy. He would have been 22 when she was 9. So they married on July 29th, and an estimated 750 million people from around the globe watched on TV, all different time zones.
Wow.
Yeah. My own mom, who I asked about this, said she woke up that morning, and this was in New York, at 5:30 a.m., and the sun wasn't even up at this point, to watch the wedding, and noted how there were thousands and thousands of people in the streets of London there to wish the bride and groom well. And the barely 20-year-old Diana seemed really incredibly shy and young during the ceremony. And I think if you could see this on YouTube, she looks like a kid. Like she's so shy.
She is a kid.
Yeah. She was 20. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
So, happily ever after, right?
Sounds like it, yeah. No, okay. Podcast over. You guys, show created by Sean McCabe.
No, wrong. See, Charles had dated around for quite a while before getting married, because it had initially been thought it would be best for him to sow his wild oats before settling down and getting ready to become king.
Okay, yeah.
But he kind of sowed like too many oats, and there was a concern he was waiting too long, because 32 at the time was pretty old for a future king to get hitched. So he rushed into this marriage with Diana.
Well, this is exactly how old I got married.
Yeah, but you're not the king. People got married much younger back in the day. Again, Diana was 19, and this was vaguely normal.
But her mind was older.
Ugh, no, it wasn't. Diana said that including weekend trips as like a single date, they had probably gone out on 12 dates before tying the knot, total.
Whirlwind courtship.
Yeah.
This is romantic.
Well, Charles was still hung up on one of the wild oats he'd sown. Camilla Shand, by 1981 married and known as Camilla Parker Bowles.
Oh, so that door's closed. There won't be any, at least Diana doesn't have to worry about that.
Charles had really wanted to marry Camilla, but his family, notably the Queen herself, did not approve of Camilla as a wife for Charles and as a future Queen of England.
Olivia Colman's not feeling it?
No. And it's kind of foggy why this is, aside from people just generally thinking she was unsuitable.
Okay.
The sense that I get, which is really gross, is basically the monarchy wanted Charles to marry someone innocent and virginal with no history to her and her dating life to create scandal. And Camilla, she was Charles's age. She'd been around. And good on her. Who cares?
Yeah.
But, I mean, if you think about it, Charles had publicly banged half the single women in Britain and some non-singles too.
Right, but she's out there getting her freak on.
Yeah, she publicly dated people.
That's a niche.
I'm not sure why it would have mattered too much about Camilla, aside from like good old-fashioned misogyny. So
yeah,
she gets married. Charles and Diana get married.
Isn't that royalty though? Isn't that this whole thing very patriarchal?
Oh, absolutely. I think they only the Queen only changed it in, I want to say 2012. It could be even later. Basically, a decree saying that if any heir, like if William had had a daughter first, it would have she would have been the next in line. It wouldn't have skipped over her and gone to the first boy.
Younger brother, yeah.
And that's only now. The Queen has been reigning since 1953, however long that is, 70 years-ish. And she only just changed that now. She's a queen,
Yeah, in A Song of Ice and Fire, they go further and they make it so you have to, like, if there's only daughters, you then have to go to, like, the king's brother.
Well, it used
and
to be
his
like
whole
that.
family.
Yeah, it used to be like the uncle, stuff like that. But now, if Charlotte had been firstborn to William, she would have been the heir. Just happened to be George. So, Charles and Diana have 2 sons, the aforementioned Princes William and Harry.
Mm-hmm.
But throughout this time, Charles is also banging around with Camilla still. And apparently,
Camilla likes to get it.
Yeah. And apparently Camilla had basically an open relationship with her husband, kind of an understanding. And they were both unfaithful to each other, and they both knew about it.
Oh, they're doing a Clinton thing.
Yeah. So that's cool, right? Whatever
you got to do.
No, it's not cool for Diana, because she didn't know this was going to happen.
Well, that's not how it works.
Well, if 3 people in the 4 were like okay with it, there's still one person that's not.
Yeah.
It's got to have consent on all sides.
Yep.
She went into the marriage truly, naively in love with Charles. She was only 20. She had a deep wish to create a stable and loving family around herself and for her children, because she never really had that in her own childhood.
Mm-hmm.
But all she received was coldness after a while, first from the palace and eventually from Charles.
All I want in my life is a stable, loving family for my kids. I'm going to raise them in the British royalty.
But if you grow up in aristocracy, especially being born in the 60s or whatever, they're still it. They're still the pinnacle of, like, family and good values and things like that. Things are different now, a lot because of what happened with Diana and all of that in the 80s and 90s. But to her, they represent the ideal family. Even if it's not true, they still do. So Charles basically got sick of dealing with Diana's battles with depression and bulimia and her need for love, and he ran...
Like, boy, oh boy, this is a lot.
He ran back to Camilla the second things got tough. Now, I have to say I do have some sympathy for Charles.
For Chuck?
Yeah, well, he was in a fucked up situation, and it is clear that he really, truly loved Camilla and just wanted to be with her from the start. But most of the time, Diana bore the brunt of his frustration about the situation, and all she wanted was warmth from him and a happy family. I mean, remember, she was still basically growing up. Like, I definitely didn't become at least more sure of myself and my wants and goals until, like, my mid to late 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have to do all that soul searching, like, in front of the entire world. And speaking of the entire world, Sean, I can't emphasize enough how much Diana was a star. I mean, she was an icon.
Mm-hmm.
She was initially shy, like my mom said, but she had this intrinsic charisma about her. Like, people were just attracted to her, even if she wasn't saying anything. She was very beautiful,
Yeah,
but there was
she was real hot.
She's beautiful, but there was something more to her. She was just different than the royal family, and she was the exact kind of different that people wanted at this time.
She was also, have we mentioned she was a kindergarten teacher? Like, she was,
yes, she loves children.
Sweet,
She's just a sweet person. She quickly became the shining light of the royal family, and this was much to the chagrin of Charles and the royal family.
Yeah, Olivia Colman's not having it, right?
Well, she doesn't want to be outshined by a younger, hotter model. The royal family's jealousy only made things for Diana more difficult, and it made her more starved for the kind of affection from her family that she was receiving from total strangers.
Yeah.
You know, people would be telling her every day that they loved her, but Charles wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
So, as the 80s bled into the 90s, the relationship was truly at a crisis point, with Charles pretty much unabashedly cheating with Camilla, like everyone knew it. And so Diana finally found some fuckboys of her own, and the couple ended up engaging in a trial separation in 1992. This was once the breakdown of their relationship became public knowledge, so it took 10 years at least.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is years of, like, public facing co-cheating and stuff, right? Like, the tabloids are full of their boyfriends and girlfriends.
Ish. Some of it still was like it was back in the JFK days, where they just didn't report on such tawdry things. But then it started to get more and more, and they realized they could sell more papers, including these sexy stories.
Yeah.
And so they did.
Duh.
After Diana did an exclusive interview with BBC current affairs show Panorama in November 1995, the final nail went into the coffin. Diana basically, in this interview, like, blows up the palace's spot on all sorts of things they tried to keep hush-hush, like her knowledge of the Camilla affair, how it had been ongoing for years, and Charles's unsuitability for kingship.
Oh, so she's like just rampage mode. I don't care. Here's all the stuff.
Yeah, I mean, she doesn't come across as like, you know, your crazy ex-girlfriend or whatever.
Uh-huh.
She seems very sad and lost and hurt. But at this point, it's kind of a combination of she has no fucks left to give, and also I think she's still deep down in her heart really wanted things to work out. She also admitted in the interview that she had depression and had engaged in bulimia and self-harm for years. So,
Self-harm?
Yeah, she would cut herself sometimes, and she also attempted suicide. And, you know, bulimia is self-harm. So this was like too much of the curtain being raised on the tawdry inner workings of the royal family.
Right.
And the queen was like, oh, no, you don't.
And she sicked all of her corgis on her.
Very adorably. No, hilariously formally, she sent letters to Charles and Diana advising them to divorce. Separate letters.
Ah.
So she basically gave a royal order to, like, cut the shit.
Yeah.
And get out. And they officially did so, with the divorce being finalized in August 1996.
Why'd they wait that long?
Divorce was really not... I mean... The Anglican Church, the Church of England,
was created for the purposes of a king getting divorced.
Yes, but he didn't get divorced, Sean, you see. He got the marriage annulled, his first marriage, because, let's go back in time, his wife, Catherine, was originally betrothed to his older brother, and I think they had married, and then he basically immediately died of illness.
Mm-hmm.
So she ends up with Henry, because back in the day, you used to marry your brother's widow. And she insisted that the original marriage had never been consummated.
Right.
So she was like, you know, we're all good, because you're not allowed to... You weren't allowed to marry someone who had been divorced or who was widowed but it had been with another man. Mm-hmm. It's a whole stupid thing. So when Henry put his eye on Anne Boleyn, he was like, well, the marriage wasn't legit anyway, so I can get this thing annulled. And that's kind of what happened.
Gotcha.
So till then...
And from then on, it was just choppy.
Yes. Well, some, yes. So there were divorces here and there after this point, after Henry and Anne Boleyn. But no real heirs were doing this. Like, this was still, if you're the king, this is what you're doing. So he was kind of hoping that she'd, like, get over it, Diana, and they could, you know, do this thing, because that's what was supposed to happen. They weren't supposed to divorce. Well, they divorced. Diana lost her title of Her Royal Highness, but still remained styled as Diana, Princess of Wales, and was still regarded as a member of the royal family because of her son William being in direct line to be king one day.
Oh, of course, yeah.
So even though she was divorced, she was still royal. Diana initially still had her royal protection officers, but viewed them as potential spies that would report directly to the royal family. And this wasn't crazy, because this sort of thing happened all the time, and she was even bugged and had her phones tapped at different times.
Sure, but what can they do now?
Well, I don't know. But she procured her own independent bodyguards. And now Diana was free.
Yay!
Freer, right? And so was Charles, basically, because Camilla and Andrew Parker Bowles divorced in 1994, which probably had a little something to do with the public outing of Camilla's affair with Charles.
I would think so, yes.
I think Andrew had the...
Oh, wait, they were cool with it, though, but
yeah,
maybe...
Andrew was fine with it, but he didn't want to be Charles's cuck to the world.
Yeah, okay, I see it.
Yeah, so that's kind of where we are by 1997. So it's a lot of backstory, but I think it's all really important for what's to come.
Okay, well, I can't wait to get into it, even though the next part, spoiler alert, it's going to get sad.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see you when we come back.
This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. Lots of things are a struggle right now. School, work, even something as simple as going to the grocery store. It could feel overwhelming. But one thing that shouldn't be overwhelming is accessing mental and emotional care. That's where BetterHelp comes in. BetterHelp is the leader in online counseling with over 4,000 licensed counselors on the site and over 500,000 people who have gotten counseling to date. The mission of BetterHelp is to make professional counseling accessible, affordable, and convenient, so anyone who struggles with life's challenges can get help anytime, anywhere. I've been using BetterHelp for the better part of this year, and honestly, I don't know how I would have gotten through 2020 without it. And, of course, Sean and Poe. When I need to talk to my counselor, I can just text her and I can schedule chats, phone calls, or video calls for longer sessions. This means I have flexibility to set a session during the week, or during busy weeks, I can just shoot her a message here and there when I have time. Take control of your mental and emotional well-being. BetterHelp is a great place to start. For 10% off your first month subscription of BetterHelp, go to our podcast link at www.betterhelp.com/ain'titscary and see how good it can feel to push past the struggle and find hope in a new day. That's www.betterhelp.com/AINTITSCARY for 10% off your first month of BetterHelp. Get professional counseling anytime, anywhere, because you deserve to be happy.
Welcome back. We have set the stage, and now we are ready for a tragedy, Caroline. Tell us about it.
Yeah. Well, Diana tragically had just 1 year to live her own life after her divorce before she died in 1997. In that time, she seriously dated a British Pakistani heart surgeon named Hasnat Khan, who many of her close friends referred to as the love of her life. There were varying accounts as to why the relationship broke up, but she stated that he ended the relationship. Though, that has been conflicted with Khan's own testimony.
Oh, he said she dumped him?
Yeah, and he said yes.
He said she ended the relationship.
Yes, but she said he did. So, she said it was mostly due to his not wanting to be in the public eye and his desire to marry someone within his own culture because he was a devout Muslim man.
I see.
Within a month of the breakup, Diana had begun a relationship with Dodi Fayed, the son of multimillionaire Mohammed Al Fayed, Egyptian businessman and owner of posh British department store Harrods.
Oh, she had a thing for Arab men.
I guess so. Some people think that, she started dating Dodi so soon after to kind of get him jealous, and what better way to get him jealous, I guess. It was with Dodi Fayed that Diana was traveling on that fateful August night in Paris when their car crashed, killing 3 of the 4 passengers.
Yes, and this is when they were being pursued by paparazzis, right?
Yeah. So
paparazzi is plural.
I'll go through that. Let's start with the crash, and this is just the basics to start with.
Okay.
Dodi and Diana were dining at the Hotel Ritz in Paris, which is another Al Fayed holding. He owned the hotel. The paparazzi had reached a fever pitch with Diana that summer because her fling with Dodi had become incredibly public, with photos of the pair fetching like bonkers money. Because there's no social media at this time, so one picture is hard to get, and if you got it, you've got the rights to it. The most expensive paparazzi photo of all time, still, which is one of Diana and Dodi kissing on the Al Fayed yacht just a month before their deaths, nabbed that paparazzo $6 million.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. So, with a single photo able to turn you into a millionaire, it's easy to see why the paparazzi were so frenzied at this time.
Yeah, it's like, it's a mad world.
Mm-hmm. Now, can you explain that reference for people our age?
Rat Race was based on it with Seth Green.
Okay. Great. So Dodi Fayed felt like he could trick the paparazzi waiting to pounce outside the Ritz and leave through the back entrance with Diana. bodyguard Trevor Reese-Jones, who worked for Mohammed Al-Fayed himself, and Henri Paul, who is the acting security manager of the Hotel Ritz and another Al-Fayed employee. Paul would serve as the driver back to Dodi's Paris apartment.
Mm-hmm.
The paparazzi, though, were not fooled, and they followed in close pursuit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you're not going to get all of them.
No, and I don't know if they even got most of them. Henri Paul attempted to elude the paparazzi by speeding to the apartment.
I keep hearing RuPaul.
Henri. He reached speeds of over 100 miles per hour. This is in miles, not kilometers. So it's a lot. It's very fast. But he lost control of the 1994 Mercedes-Benz W140 at the entrance to the Pont d'Alma tunnel. The car struck the right-hand wall, swerved to the left of the two-lane road, and then collided head-on with the 13th pillar of the tunnel at an estimated speed of 65 miles per hour. This is just the crashing speed after they had already hit multiple things.
Right.
So that's more than twice the tunnel's speed limit. This crash occurred around 12:23 a.m. Paris time. Paparazzi on motorcycles swarmed the sedan. Some rushed to help, and some just took pictures.
Of course.
Gross. The police arrived on the scene about 10 minutes after the crash, with an ambulance arriving 5 minutes after police.
That's a pretty slow response time. That's not great.
It's not great, but it's not crazy, right? Several photographers were taken into custody immediately. Dodi and driver Henri Paul had died on impact. Bodyguard Trevor Reese-Jones was unconscious in the front passenger seat, and he was like all fucked up. I mean, his whole face was broken. And Diana, in the rear passenger seat, was injured but conscious. So she's the only one awake at this point.
Okay.
An off-duty physician at the scene, Frédéric Mellier, he attended to Diana and reported she had no visible injuries but was in clear shock. Diana was extracted from the wreck a half an hour after police arrived and went into cardiac arrest and received external cardiopulmonary resuscitation, CPR.
Yep.
After this, her heart began beating again.
They didn't know why it had stopped in the first place?
They figured there was stuff that they couldn't see.
Mm-hmm.
She might have had a broken arm. They weren't sure about that. That was like one thing that went around. But there was not a lot of visible injury aside from your standard bruises and scrapes and cuts and stuff.
If you tell me she died of a broken heart, I'm going to be very upset.
She was moved to the ambulance 18 minutes after her heart started beating again, and the ambulance left the scene a bit over 20 minutes after that. It arrived at the Pitre-Salpêtre hospital about half an hour later. So for those trying to keep track of times here, the ambulance arrived at the crash scene at about 12:35 a.m. And didn't make it to the hospital until 2:06 a.m.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
I'm going to go into that, but that's definitely something that people bring up.
Uh-huh.
Upon closer examination, it became clear Diana's heart had been displaced to the right side of her chest.
Sorry, what?
Yeah, tearing her pulmonary vein and pericardium, but that's something I guess they didn't see. Despite rigorous resuscitation attempts, she died in the hospital at approximately 4 a.m., and her death was announced to the media at 6 a.m.
Your heart can just be jolted loose and thrown across your body to the other side of your chest?
I assume she had broken ribs as well. And like it said, she tore the pulmonary vein and like all that stuff. So, not great. And yes, your heart can apparently be displaced.
And this is all internal injury from just bouncing around the inside of the vehicle, right?
Presumably, yeah. But this car probably hit the first thing. Yep. Not the final pillar, but the first thing at over 100 miles per hour.
Mm-hmm.
So you ask, what's fishy about this? It's tragic for sure, but the car was speeding in a claustrophobic tunnel that's been called by many people a dangerous structure and like really bad construction.
Mm-hmm.
But there are a number of admittedly suspicious details to the accident, just off the top. There is one traffic camera inside the tunnel, but it was conveniently not working the night of the accident.
That sounds inconvenient to me, Carrie.
Well, depends on whose perspective we're talking about. Yes. Diana habitually wore a seatbelt, but on this occasion had not put it on. However, the rear right seatbelt, where she was sitting, it was found to be defective, which people think maybe is the reason she didn't put it on. But it's a coincidence. It's a very interesting coincidence.
Yeah, she didn't want to make a big scene in front of her new boyfriend. The seatbelt's not working. Whatever.
Mm-hmm. One fact that people bring up is how, despite 7 paparazzi being arrested on the scene, the French police basically treated it like a basic traffic accident. Evidence was deeply compromised. The crushed up Mercedes, which would be Exhibit A in any case.
You would think.
It was thrown onto a flatbed truck and bounced through the streets of Paris on the way to its destination.
Well, this sounds like incompetent policing.
Yeah. Then, within hours, the crime scene was swept up and hosed down.
Great! Let's make sure there's no traces of any valuable evidence left.
The police did, however, find smears of white paint along the right side of the Mercedes, showing the Mercedes had contact with another car. And this was a white car, obviously.
Right.
It took days to figure out what the car's model was, but every kind of official brand car paint is traceable. I think this is actually one of the reasons how they found the Green River Killer.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Because every brand pretty much, they only use the same color on certain cars, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those are only made by certain places, so you can kind of narrow it down. So eventually they found out this kind of paint was only ever used for the Fiat Uno.
Wow.
Between the years 1983 and 1987.
So you've got a specific model and 4 years?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So keep that in mind for a second.
Fiat Uno.
Mm-hmm. Let's discuss the pursuing vehicles, because this is going to keep coming up.
The motorcycles?
Yeah, so paparazzi were following the Mercedes mostly on motorbikes. It was just the easiest way for them to, hop on and off.
It's Europe. Tiny streets, sure.
Exactly. Though they'd caught up to the Mercedes at the red light before the tunnel, according to Detective Colin McLaren, who is the investigator for the documentary Princess Diana's Death Mystery Solved, the Mercedes approached...
We did it.
He did it. The Mercedes approached the tunnel at a speed upward of 100 miles per hour. So this would have left any regular motorbikes far behind. Like, these aren't even mostly motorcycles.
Right.
You're just little...
Yeah.
So...
Dirt bikes.
Yeah. However, in the media, at least, the blame for the crash fell heavily on the shoulders of the paparazzi chasing the car.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah. According to witnesses, there was the screeching of tires just before the crash, as if the car was, braking sharply. And there were 3 motorcycles surrounding the Mercedes at the time, along with a mysterious white car seen leaving the crime scene, which they said was a white Fiat Uno.
Okay. Let's find the driver.
Yeah.
No problem.
Well, police wanted to find this Fiat because, at worst, it very likely had a hand in causing the crash. And at best, it was part of a hit and run. So, either way, they want to figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
Colin McLaren found that it was likely the Mercedes skidded to avoid the Fiat near the entrance to the tunnel because there was an on-ramp that merged into the road just before the tunnel. It's very stupid.
Yeah.
So this is I think it's coming off of some sort of highway.
Mm-hmm.
And then the main road that the car was driving down, they merge into one just before the tunnel.
Right.
And there's also...
like all those horrible entrances on the Merritt Parkway that are just right into traffic.
Yes. And this is also, there's a bump. It's a small hill right at this point.
So you're blind coming up the entrance ramp?
No, it's down. You go down into the tunnel.
Okay.
It's crazy. So it probably skidded to avoid the Fiat near the entrance to the tunnel and scraped down the side of the Fiat. Didn't avoid it completely. Became airborne over this bump because it was going so fast.
Yes, this is before it even enters the tunnel?
Mm-hmm. The side tires would hit the wall in front of the tunnel opening. So, again, if you're picturing, it's like an overpass kind of tunnel.
Yep.
You're going down into it. There are 2 walls on each side.
Mm-hmm. And it's heading for the right
walls.
side.
Mm-hmm. So it hit that. And he found skid marks at the scene and a large tear in the right front tire of the Mercedes. So that's kind of makes sense. He figured out how this crash happened. So it's hurtling into the tunnel, already having hit 2 things, the Fiat and the wall, and it's not in control anymore. And then we know the rest.
13th pillar. head on 65 miles an hour.
Yeah. I mean, we kind of know the rest because the Fiat was seen fleeing the scene of the accident. So, who was driving it? Were they a part of the plot to cause the accident?
How many white Fiats from 84 to 87 were in,
Well, I could tell you it was about 4,000.
Oh, no!
Because
Drive another car, Europe!
Because the people who had seen it, Paris does this thing where their license plate has a certain number. So
okay,
you can tell.
Caroline, we do that as well.
No, I mean, the Paris license plate, that city has its own number. That's part of every Paris license plate.
Okay.
You fucking dweeb.
Like an area code.
Yes, it's like an area code for that city. It's on a car. I think it's 2 numbers. Shit. So the person who saw it said, this is a Paris, I know what a Paris number is. This had a Paris number. I don't know the rest of the numbers because it was probably going fast, but it could tell.
Mm-hmm.
So one possible ID for the driver is Lee Van Tan. He owned a white Fiat Uno that mere weeks after the accident had been hastily painted red.
Oh, what do you know?
There's still a bunch of white on the inside of the car. It's so bad.
And he's leaning on it there's a bucket of red paint sitting on the ground. And he's like, I just wanted more speeding tickets.
Tan insists that he was working that night, but, he fits the description of the driver given by the eyewitness. It was, a man, short man, dark hair, and they also had seen a black and tan dog with an orange muzzle in the back seat, and he had a black and tan dog that used a muzzle.
Well, that's, it's pretty specific. It's a lot of indicators.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Tan's father said years later, quote, I do not want to believe he was in the tunnel that night, but I know he has said things that just do not add up. He behaved very strangely at the time and has behaved strangely since. What I do know is that the Fiat was painted only hours after the crash that killed Princess Diana.
Wow. His father said that? His
own father, yeah. Tan later admitted that he was, in fact, driving in Paris that night, but was not near the accident scene.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
But he couldn't remember what he was doing, where he went, or who he saw.
Great.
He just knew I wasn't there.
Wasn't sure as hell wasn't there.
Yeah. But the police never analyzed the left side of his Fiat, which would have been the part of the car to scrape against the Mercedes.
Right.
And Tan was eliminated from the investigation.
Well, the second part doesn't make any sense. The first part, I don't know if scraping up his Fiat again is going to do you any good if he's already repainted, is it?
Well, they might be able to find traces of the black Mercedes paint, possibly, underneath. Who knows? The French authorities at this point just stop searching for the driver anymore.
Oh, it's not our royals.
Yeah. But maybe it really wasn't Tan. Maybe that's why they stopped looking. What about paparazzo James Anderson, Sean?
What about him?
Anderson was a well-known photographer that had been following Diana that summer taking photos. He flew from Sardinia to Paris on the same day Diana and Dodi did, but he could not prove his whereabouts on the night of the crash.
Same day Diana and Dodi did.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of D's.
So why does it matter that he didn't have an alibi? Well, because...
Well, it usually does with crimes.
Well, why him specifically? He owned a white Fiat Uno, and he lived in France. In Paris. So,
along with 4,000 other people.
Well, it was a pretty big coincidence because he had basically been stalking 2 of the victims all summer. So this car was also repainted shortly after the crash and sold by Anderson in October of that year. So 2 months later.
Okay.
Case closed.
Yeah,
right?
What's his explanation?
I mean, let's ask him. Oh, we can't. Because in May 5th, 2000, police found a badly burned body in the wreckage of a car deep in the woods in the south of France. The body was Anderson. His death was officially ruled a suicide. Christophe Pellat, who was the first fireman on the scene, insisted that, quote, I saw him at close range and I'm absolutely convinced he had been shot in the head twice.
What?
So he shot himself in the head twice and then set his car on fire. Is what.
Well, presumably he set his car on fire first.
And shot himself in the head twice?
Well, that's one guy's testimony. And I could see him being racked with guilt over, hit and running Princess
If it was him.
Diana and then killing himself. Or, hear me out, being murdered by the British royals as part of a cover-up.
Well, a week after Anderson's body was finally identified and his death was made public, 3 masked men broke into the office of the SEPA agency where Anderson worked. They made off with several cameras, laptops, and hard drives. One hostage of the 3 men, they were convinced these men were part of the French Secret Service.
Why?
Just what they said.
Based on what?
I assume
That's
based
fascinating.
by what they were talking about or whatever, or how they did things. Some people
They're
think,
like, oh, we'll have to remember this next time we save the president.
ooh,
The French president. We call him a premier or something. What do they call him?
Something.
I think it's a president, actually. Continue.
Some people think this break-in and robbery was related to Anderson's death. So, interesting.
Well, it is. I would love more connective tissue with this one. I would love to know, and there was this thing on that hard drive they stole.
I mean, there were other details, like the press said that Anderson was about to get a divorce and his wife was cheating on him and stuff like that. And his wife and coworkers were like, that's not true.
Oh.
So why did the press say this? Well, depends on who fed him that information.
Interesting. Are we going to get into Anderson more next week?
Unfortunately, that's like the bulk of it. But it's still pretty weird. So back to the crash.
Mm-hmm.
Eyewitness Francois Levistre testified that in his rearview mirror, one of the motorbikes cut across the front of the Mercedes. There was a big white flash, and the car started to zigzag. Then it crashed. I thought it could be an assassination or a gangland hit.
Wow.
Another driver behind the Mercedes saw something similar, including the bright flash of light. So there were multiple eyewitnesses on this one. So maybe the flash was the flash of a camera, which could have disoriented driver Henri Paul. Even though they probably couldn't have caught up to him, maybe someone did.
There certainly were more. We know there were cameras in the area. We don't know there were high-powered rifles in the area, which I assume is your the next possibility.
Well, we're going to talk about the flash for a minute. Because former MI6 agent Richard Tomlinson, now MI6, is James Bond MI5 or MI6?
MI6.
Yeah, so he is confirmed to be a secret agent formerly.
British intelligence.
Richard Tomlinson gave a sworn statement to the French inquiry in May 1999 that MI6 had been involved with the crash. He also stated Henri Paul was an MI6 agent, and that Diana's death mirrored plans he saw in 1992 for the assassination of then-president of Serbia, Slobodan Milosevic.
Oh.
By using a strobe light to blind his chauffeur and cause an accident. He walked back these claims years later, claiming a faulty memory, but he did recall the use of strobe lighting for this purpose being part of his MI6 training.
So he said that RuPaul was
Henri Paul
was an agent, but he also died in the crash, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's not a great mission.
Well, Another strange factor in this accident is the driver, Henri Paul. So, along with the paparazzi, he commonly receives most of the blame for the deaths.
Well, he was driving 100 miles an hour and slammed into the wall of a tunnel.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it was said that Paul was drunk driving that night. In fact, one headline soon after the accident stated he was, in all caps, drunk as a pig.
Was this the New York Post?
I don't know. But the media started spreading the notion that Paul's drunk driving had caused the accident even before the test results came back from the pathologist or were announced to the public.
But when they came back, he was drunk?
Yeah.
Okay.
His blood alcohol level was over 3 times France's legal limit.
All right, well, I'm not going to play the fiddle for him too much on people jumping the gun to judgment.
Well, the blood test was a little odd. His personal doctor testified that he suffered from depression and, yes, was concerned about drinking. So the doctor prescribed him Prozac and a drug to combat alcohol addiction, and he was taking both the night of the crash. But in Paul's first blood sample, there are no prescription drugs found there at all.
Interesting.
So could the samples have been switched?
Interesting.
The pathologist was admittedly haphazard in their investigation. They didn't even bother to label the samples.
What's going on with these French cops?
I don't know. They left them unlabeled in the fridge to be labeled by someone else the next day.
It's not the leftover potato salad.
Yeah.
You're not me. You're a detective.
Detect. Friends and family of Paul swear he wasn't an alcoholic, while what his doctor said would seem to contradict that. But Paul was also off duty before being called back to the Ritz for Dodie and Diana, and he was seen that night at his local pub having a few drinks.
Okay, so done.
At the Ritz, he only had 2 drinks, Ricards, which wouldn't have alone put him at 3 times the legal limit at the time of the crash, because again, you're also thinking that he's sobering up from at least the earlier ones. And
well, I was going to say, if he didn't know he was working, he could have had 8 pints at the bar before he came over and had the 2 drinks with Diana and Chuck. By the way, he shouldn't have had those 2 drinks.
Sure, but
either way.
Yeah. He might just not have known that he was going to be working unexpectedly, and he could have made his way up to that amount. Now, I've seen the video. It's like more just rapid pictures, security pictures, of the halls of the Ritz from that night. And I have to admit, he looks pretty normal on the security footage. He's not like swaying or anything like that. But many people with drinking problems are able to appear perfectly normal to the average eye. That night, he was also continuously smoking cigars. And, at this time, you could smoke inside, so he was smoking in the hotel. And that could have masked the smell of alcohol on his breath, so it would have clouded the obviousness of his drunkenness.
Sure.
Now, here's another little bugaboo with the blood tests. In the 2 French tox lab tests, Paul was found to have a 12.8 carbon hemoglobin saturation, which is a combination of blood's iron-carrying pigment and carbon monoxide.
Okay. You have to know that meant nothing to me
It meant
so
nothing to me
far.
either. Here's what it means.
Okay.
A smoker normally has about 10% as they're constantly smoking.
Mm-hmm.
So the result of 12.8% is not like crazy unusual.
Especially because he's been chomping on big black cigars all night.
Mm-hmm. But another test, backed by the opponents of the official findings, showed Paul had a 20.7% saturation of carbon monoxide, basically, in his blood at the time of his death. So if that's accurate, it would have meant that Paul's blood had 40% saturation of carbon monoxide a few hours earlier, and he would have scarcely been able to function at all.
From what? Smoking?
Well, that's the thing. These findings have led some to question if Paul's blood could have been switched or even just mistakenly, because there was no labels on them, with that of a suicide victim sharing the same morgue.
Oh, Jesus
Someone that had
Christ.
killed themselves
In a
by carbon monoxide inhalation. Yeah.
Oh, what do you know? And there was someone like that in the morgue?
I couldn't find definite data on that, but
Gotcha.
that's been like a hypothesis. And Mercedes themselves even came out and said, because there was some speculation that the airbag going off, or him hitting his head or something on the airbag, he could have inhaled some sort of carbon monoxide from that, but they said that it wasn't possible. So
sure
Mercedes themselves was like, it's not us.
I'm sure they were in a hurry to go our airbags will not kill you.
Yeah. So that's weird.
Yeah.
Just in general. Another frequently cited bit of evidence toward conspiracy is the incredible amount of time, which you mentioned, between the initial crash and Diana making it to the hospital, which was about an hour and a half total, maybe more. Now, to us in America, this sounds totally nuts. We're used to ambulances throwing on those sirens and speeding through traffic to get to point A, from point A to point B, super fast.
How far is the hospital?
Not far at all. But in France, they do things differently than we do. In many ways, I'm sure. But instead of rushing someone in a medical emergency to the hospital as quickly as possible, they try to administer as much medical care as possible on the scene.
Oh, okay.
That's just how they do it. They tried to do so and very slowly extracted Diana from the car, but once she was removed, she went into her first cardiac arrest.
And so they did CPR.
Then, when she was in the ambulance passed the Hôtel Dieu Hospital on the Ile de la Cité, en route to the Piété-Salpêtre Hospital. So why didn't they stop at the first hospital? Some people say, well, the second was more equipped for cardiac emergencies, like Diana's.
Okay. But surely it'd be better to get her to a hospital.
Well, they skipped the first one. And they were also going very, very slowly, like driving very, very slowly.
Why?
They said this was because they didn't want to put Diana's body into further shock with intense movement or speed. And it didn't help much because she had a second cardiac arrest anyway during the transport.
Yeah.
So.
And also, I don't know.
This says to me of like covering their butts of this is how we do things here.
But that whole okay, great. So you administered as much medical attention as you could on the scene and on the way, and you think that that's good enough? Because you didn't realize her heart was on a different side of her chest. So I don't think the medical care in the field was good enough.
No, certainly not. I mean,
her heart was on the right.
Yeah, it was in a different place.
Don't you think you would have noticed that when you were doing the CPR?
You would like to think so, Sean. So that's a weird thing. And finally...
I might come out of this with a strong anti-French bias. That might be the only thing you convince me of. Anti-French police.
I'm not trying to. I'm just
EMTs.
Trying to deliver the facts. Diana and Dodie typically traveled with a professional driver, while two bodyguards traveled close behind in a separate car. And this was their protocol so that if anything were to happen, there was backup, like two different cars. However, at the last minute, Dodie changed his plan and insisted that Henri Paul, not a professional driver, just the security director for the hotel, would drive them and one bodyguard, because two wouldn't fit in the car, in order to evade the paparazzi, with them leaving secretly at the back of the hotel. It's surprising this plan was agreed to by all parties, especially the security guards.
Well, especially, I would say Henri Paul. He's 6 beers deep. He just had a couple of drinks, and they're like, where you go.
Yeah. The thing about Henri Paul is he was basically up for a promotion. The main director of security had recently stepped down and retired. So I think people think that he was trying to impress Dodie, and thus his boss, Mohammed Al-Fayed, hopefully get this job.
Plus, he was a secret MI6 agent.
That too. No one's quite sure what caused this change from what they usually did, aside from maybe Dodie trying to impress his princess by evading the hordes of photographers and, having a peaceful drive over to the apartment, I guess.
Give it a rest, Dodie.
Yeah, well, he did. And, sorry. And so this is seen as suspicious, this change in plan by some people.
Mm-hmm. But whose call was it? It sounds like it might have been Dodie's, so...
Yeah, but, everyone agreed to it.
Yeah,
so.
but he dead.
He is dead, yes. R.I.P. So, that's it on the night of the crash for now. But next week we'll discuss the main reasons behind why people think Diana may have been assassinated, who would have ordered the hit, the official inquests into her death, and even some fringe theories involving Jesus Christ.
Oh, I can't wait for that one. That's going to be my favorite.
Mm-hmm. So that's the end of part 1.
When there was only one set of skid marks, that's when I was carrying the car.
Or your underwear.
Oh, no.
Anyway.
Caroline.
Sorry.
It's not that kind of skid mark.
Oh. You're here, which means you love podcasts. But are you looking for another kind of entertainment on the go? Audible is the leading provider of spoken word entertainment and audiobooks, ranging from bestsellers to memoirs, news, business, and more. By signing up for a free trial at www.audibletrial.com/ain'titscary, you'll receive access to thousands of titles with 1 credit toward any audiobook and 2 Audible originals, free during your trial and then with subscription each month after. Personally, my favorite Audible title is also my favorite book, It by Stephen King. I went into this audiobook ready to judge because I've loved this novel since I was a kid. But between the stellar production value and the truly breathtaking narration performance by actor Steven Weber, I was 100% all in. If you like this podcast and have a strong stomach, I think you will be too. Not into audiobooks? No problem. With podcasts, theatrical performances, guided meditations, and more, Audible offers something for everyone. So what are you waiting for? Get started now. And hey, you'll be helping support the podcast. Visit our link at www.audibletrial.com/ain'titscary for a free trial. That's www.audibletrial.com/AINTITSCARY. Audible. Listen more. We are back to the Bizarre Bazaar this week for another follow-up on the Forest Fen treasure.
You've got to be shitting me.
That's what I thought too.
This thing again?
Yeah. As you may remember from previous news segments, we reported that the treasure had been found, that Fen himself had passed away.
Super basic, returning all the way back to basics in case you didn't hear the first one. This is a rich guy who left behind a treasure hunt.
Yes, basically. And someone had also been arrested in connection with his own search for the treasure, but we still didn't know the identity of the finder himself. Well, now we do, Sean.
And this was literally a chest of like gold and rubies?
We don't know everything that was in there, but it's like antiques, gold, the whole works. This is literally breaking news as we record because this statement was released today at medium.com, where the finder had originally and anonymously reflected on Fen's passing and his own discovery of the Forest Fen treasure.
Wow. Any highlights?
Yeah, well, the finder, who we can report is named Jack Stuff, came forward today to disclose his own identity due to the fact that, as he stated, quote, the U.S. District Court for New Mexico has ruled that Forest's estate must provide some of my personal information to a woman I do not know and with whom I have never communicated who has brought a meritless suit against me. This would make my name a matter of public record, so I chose to come forward today.
So he's being a little bit of a bitch about it, though.
Well, the case, according to Stuff, is a baseless one having to do with his search for the treasure, brought by Chicago real estate attorney Barbara Anderson, who alleges that he located it by hacking her texts and emails and stealing her solution to where it was located.
Well, did he?
Well, the thing is, she believed the treasure was in New Mexico, and the case is going forward in the state, but the treasure was, by all accounts of the finder and Forest Fen, found in Wyoming, which is nowhere near New Mexico.
This does sound like a pretty meritless case, then.
Yeah. Jack previously worked in comedy writing for sites like Wonket and BuzzFeed before leaving due to controversy surrounding some jokes and articles he'd written.
Did we get a look at what those were?
One of them was a tasteless joke about Trig Palin, Sarah's son with Down syndrome.
Ah, okay.
But he's now 32, a medical student, several years wiser, and apparently a treasure chest richer.
Hey, another 32-year-old.
Yeah, you could have found a treasure chest by now, Sean.
I could have married Princess Diana. I married better.
Oh, well, I mean, I don't believe that, but aw.
But I didn't find the treasure chest. That would have been nice.
Yeah, I would have liked that too.
And by this age, Alexander had conquered the known world. Let's talk about something less depressing. What's this guy doing?
Well, in the Medium piece he wrote, he goes on to discuss how he searched for the treasure for 2 years, finding it this past June 6th in Wyoming. He says, quote, "To be clear, I am not and was never employed by Forrest, nor did he pick me in any way to retrieve the treasure."
Like Charlie in the Chocolate Factory?
Well, there is some thought that, everything wasn't on the up and up, but it sounds mostly like people bitter that they didn't find it first.
Well, I'm sorry, Jack, that I said you were being a bitch about this. You're being a crusader for justice, as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm. Stiff added as explanation for his anonymity.
It was bitchy, though.
"For the past 6 months, I have remained anonymous, not because I have anything to hide, but because Forrest and his family endured stalkers, death threats, home invasions, frivolous lawsuits, and a potential kidnapping. all at the hands of people with delusions related to his treasure. I don't want those things to happen to me or my family. So we'll definitely be keeping up to date with this case and the story of the treasure. I'm just surprised we have an answer to who the finder is so soon.
Me too.
But
And Jack, we're not going to bother you. We're not going to reach out to you. But if you're listening, we want you to reach out to us.
yes, in case you're listening.
Because I'm sure you're probably a Patreon backer already. Oh, more on that in a moment.
And that's it for the Bizarre Bazaar this week and our news.
I love it. Godspeed, Jack. I'm sure he's going to win that lawsuit, no problem.
Yeah, probably.
If he loses it, I want to go file a lawsuit in Mexico. New Mexico.
Yeah, seriously.
All right. Well, take a listen to this break, you guys. It's a really, really good one. Thanks, as always, for listening to another episode. We're so glad to have you with us as we talk about this incredibly depressing topic.
It's interesting, though.
It is. It's fascinating, and I can't wait to dig into all the bullshit of it all next week. That's my favorite part.
Of course.
Find legitimate answers. We're gonna get to the bottom of this and figure out who killed Princess Di.
Yeah, obviously.
Caroline, we have something important and exciting. A new way for maybe folks listening right now to connect with us a little closer. Come a little bit closer, as Jay and the Americans asked.
Absolutely.
We are up on patreon.com right now. Listen, this show will always be free. We're never going to charge you anything to listen to us. But if you like what we're doing and you want a little bit more, or you just want to let us know how much you like it, head over to Patreon. And we've got all kinds of cool rewards, actually. I think the best reward will just be kind of the feeling in your heart of knowing you're supporting struggling artists. But there are some pretty cool reward tiers. So, Carrie, what are some of those lower end ones?
Sure. So there's going to be different tiers. So it's kind of customized to however you feel comfortable supporting us. And there are different perks, like you get special minisodes and other content. I think we were talking about doing a Hellraiser direct-to-TV or direct-to-DVD movie watch-along type of thing.
Yes, I want to do watch-alongs for all of the... We've already watched the first 3 Hellraiser films together. Those made it into theaters, and they're crazy. So I really want to see what didn't make it to theaters. Mm-hmm. So we're going to do watch-alongs for the direct-to-video.
Yeah, so that's exciting. That's really exciting.
I think it's going to be
It's going to be funny. It's going to be bad. So we have minisodes ready to go. Our first one is going to be on Typhoid Mary, and that'll be on Patreon, only for Patreon subscribers.
We also have a new little spin-off series we're excited to get started over on Patreon. Mm-hmm. Ain't It Kitschy? And that's where Carrie's going to tell me all about different novelty hits. And we'll listen to some just very silly, very dumb music. It's going to be great.
Yeah, so if you are a fan of the Monster Mash or any of those dance crazes or the Purple People Eater, all of those crazy things, we'll be talking about them at some point because I think it's just really interesting and weird and funny.
Yeah.
And there'll be other stuff. You can vote on different episode topics that we have coming up, so you can try to get the one that you want immediately, or you can submit topics. We'll have a Discord server going that's just for patrons, and it'll be great. So, again, this show will always be free. And you can always connect to us with social media at Ain't It Scary at most places, whether that's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And but if you happen to have a couple extra bucks, and again, it's been a hell of a year. We totally don't require anything more than you just listening. But if you want to support us, it'll help us get better equipment. We'll be able to do more content, more episodes, maybe video content. It'll just make things easier for us and make us be able to deliver more for you.
And it's also about, I think, building a community and bringing this community closer together.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends that I've made through podcast communities. And I think that's just kind of the best part, is connecting to people who are like yourselves. And, if you listen to this show, you're probably a little like us in some way. And any listeners are probably like each other in some way, too. At least you have one interest, and that's everything scary and weird. So we hope that you join us over there at patreon.com/ain'titscary.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
Thanks for listening. This show was created by Sean and Carrie McCabe. Music by Kyle Ryan.
Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at ain'titscary. And check out our website at ain'titscary.com. And now our Patreon at patreon.com/ain'titscary. And please subscribe to the show and throw us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. We'll be forever grateful.
Yeah, or just tell people about the podcast.
But the reviews and the ratings do help because that makes it more viewable to other people. But yes, please tell people about us. I don't want to be too needy, but please.
If your friend's in your car, just put it on. Don't ask them. It's fine.
Yeah. And we're looking forward to connecting with you on social, on Patreon, whatever you want to do. So we'll see you next Thursday.
This has been a production of Long Boy Media.